Что происходит?
Мы с клипа пытаемся настроить, чтобы он через OBS переводил.
Через OBS. На его компьютер? О.
Во. Все. Ну, вам надо добавить, да, потом сохранить это все будет. Щелкните на слово «первый».
So, yesterday, where are we? Yeah, yesterday, they read 26 and 27. Okay.
25, 26, 27.
Okay.
Видите, уголочек?
Pretty heavy stuff. Gosh.
В очень хорошем качестве.
It's also amazing that this body that the Yamadutas cover the subtle body. Srila Prabhupada says it's also amazing. He spoke in
Тогда
this
нажмите правой кнопкой справа.
this person that they take can travel 792,000 miles
Yeah,
in like 2 or 3 seconds.
something like that.
So to travel that speed, this body allows one to travel that speed.
Right. 792,000 miles within a few seconds.
Yes. Yeah, further down it says within 2 or 3 seconds.
Yeah.
Whereas the body, the material bodies that we have, limits us in terms of
Oh, the gross body, yeah. It'll fall to pieces. It's the subtle body, though, basically. The subtle body is covered by the constables, the Yamadutas. This covering, oh, I see, yeah, of very fine elements. Amazing.
And that's the body, I think we read in the previous verses, that allows one to experience all the different sufferings.
That's right, without dying. Yeah.
Dogs biting and giving different experiences.
Entrails pulled out, limbs lopped off, hurled down from hilltops.
That would be in this other body then.
Well, it's in the subtle body, but it has a covering. That's what Prabhupada says here, that the subtle body is covered by the constables. So the living entity can pass such a long distance quickly.
So those entrails that you read about now, where would it be? Not in the subtle body.
I don't know, maybe.
In that other body that
Well,
covered.
see, this covering. It's a covering over the subtle body.
Yes.
I don't think it's an actual body. It's just sort of like clothing or sort of.
Because if one is in the subtle body, then that's like a ghost form.
Well, yeah.
So there's no experience because...
No, there's experience.
Yeah, there would be because the soul is there, right?
Oh, yeah. It's definitely experience. But it can't die. The covering is just for the speed. That's what it seems. Excuse me.
Allow it, Srila Prabhupada said, I think it doesn't, or it was in the text, I'm not sure. It doesn't allow a person to die.
Yeah, that's right. It doesn't let them die, even though they're suffering fantastically. Hare Krishna. Saukyama. Oh, good. Saukyam. How's your Tamil? Is it okay? You can understand. I can just understand a little. You're Hindi though, right? Or you're a mixture?
But no one speaks Hindi in my family. I'm one South African. I only know English, and in school I learned Afrikaans, but now my Afrikaans is almost 0%.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's easy to forget. Where's the cartels? Are they here? Oh, they're here. Sorry. And Mataji Pushpa, you're Tamil, right? I saw your name, Pushpa Veli. That's a typical Tamil name. You understand?
Sadly, no.
Saukyama, you understand that? How are you? And Saukyam means I'm fine. Just some of the little Tamil that I know. Oh, excuse me. To the Srimad Bhagavatam reader class next time, will you sing Jai Radha Madhava? Yeah. Do you know when that may be?
This evening.
Oh, today. Okay. Yes. You can play cartels? Not really. Okay, let us begin. What's the time? Okay. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Gopi Jana Balava Giribaradhare Vijana Balava Gopi Jana Balava Giribaradhare Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachare Yamunatira Vanachare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Vishvad Paramahansa Parivrajak Status Srimad His Divine Grace. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. ISKCON's founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki. Sri Sri Radha Radhanath Ki. Sri Giri Govardhan Ki. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki. Sankirtan Yagya Ki. Gaur Premanande. All glories to their assembled devotees. All glories to their assembled devotees. All glories. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 30, description of adverse fruitive activities. Text 28. Yas Tamasranta Tamisra Rauravadyash Cha Yatana Bhunkte Naro Va Nari Va Sangena Nirmita Yastamisranda Tamisra Rauravadyascha Yatana Bhunkte Narovanariva Mita Sangena Nirmita Yastamisranta Tamisra Rauravadyascha Yatana Bhunkte Narovan Mita Sangena Nirmita Yastamisranta Tamisra Rauravadyascha Yatana Bhunkte Narovanariva Mita Sangena Nirmita. Tamisra Riva Sangena Nirmita
Yastamisranda Tamisra
Tamisra
Rauravadhyascha Yatana Bhunkte Naro Bhunkte Naro Vanariva
Tamisranda Tamisra Rauravadyas Chayatana Nariva Tasangena Nirmita. Matajes. Yastamisranda Tamisra Ravajas Bhukte Narova Nariva Mita Sangena Nirmita. Matajes. Tamisra Rauravadyas Chayatana Nariva Mita Sangena Nirmita. Samisranda Tamisra Rauravadyas Chayatana Bhumte Narova Nariva Mita Sangena Nirmita. Tamisranda Tamisra Rauravadyash Chandhyatana Nariva Mita Sangena Nirmita. Ya which Tamisra, the name of a hell. Under Tamisra, the name of a hell. Raurava, the name of a hell. Adya, and so on. Cha, and yatana, punishments. Bhukte, goes. Nara, man. Va, or. Nari, woman. Va, or. Mita, mutual. Sangena, by association. Nirmita. Translation. Men and women whose lives were built upon indulgence in illicit sex life are put into many kinds of miserable conditions in the hells known as Tamisra, under Tamisra, and Raurava. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Materialistic life is based on sex life. The existence of all the material people who are undergoing severe tribulation in the struggle for existence is based on sex. Therefore, in the Vedic civilization, sex life is allowed only in a restricted way. It is for the married couple and only for begetting children. But when sex life is indulged in for sense gratification illegally and illicitly, both the man and the woman await severe punishment in this world or after death. In this world also, they're punished by virulent diseases like syphilis and gonorrhea. And in the next life, as we see in this passage of Srimad Bhagavatam, They're put into different kinds of hellish conditions to suffer. In Bhagavad Gita, first chapter, illicit sex life is also very much condemned. And it is said that one who produces children by illicit sex life is sent to hell. It is confirmed here in the Bhagavatam that such offenders are put into hellish conditions of life in Tamisra, under Tamisra, and Raurava. Yas Tamisranda Tamisra, Rauravadyash cha yatana, Bhunkte nariva, Mita Sangena Nirmita. Men and women whose lives were built upon indulgence in sex life are put into many kinds of miserable conditions in the hells known as Tamisra, under Tamisra, and Raurava. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presta Bhutale Shamati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Well, I assume that yesterday Ananta Shesh Prabhu gave a sufficiently graphic description of the graphic descriptions given in the previous verses. And this is graphic, and Prabhupada's purport is graphic and clear, because one has to understand what these things mean, really. And, you know, one thing I've been thinking, reading through these verses, one thing I've been thinking is that it's enough to put you off material life. It's just enough to put you off. To reconsider if one still has some fleeting attachments or whatever attachments to material life. Hopefully they're only fleeting, but even if they're stronger, these things are so graphic and shocking, truly shocking, that hopefully one will come out, at least as devotees, hopefully will come out at the end. It's there is a little further to go, in fact. There's a little further to go. Oh yeah, oh gosh, oh, it's not going to be, it'll be getting worse before it gets better. Oh, Krishna. Yes, so in people, when they read these things, and if they have some Krishna consciousness, they will develop some realization. It's just not worth it in materialistic life. It's simply not worth it at all. I was reading Sri Swami's purport to this verse earlier, and I happen to have it here. And you know what he says? This is a very short purport. whatever pains are experienced, and it seems that is in the broad sense, whatever pains are experienced in life, whatever pains are experienced are produced by association of man and woman. Because they sin together, they experience suffering together. Or previously married, or thinking of becoming married, or whatever. Please bear these things in mind. You know, it's not easy. I haven't been married in this lifetime. Observe, and my observations tell me it's not easy. At least sometimes it's not easy. And sometimes, a lot of the time, it's not easy to be householders. And these arrangements end in divorce, just in life in general. Divorce is so prominent. And so, you know, they struggle to get on. But then according to this, at the end, after the end, they may go together and experience all of this together. It's truly shocking, to say the least. Whatever pains are experienced are produced by association of man and woman. Because they sin together, they experience suffering together. You know, some of us sort of, by one means or another, get through this lifetime without getting into that situation of the tight connection. People, even sometimes some devotees, they lament about that they would have preferred to have been married and gone through that experience. But us survivors, or however you might want to put it, but it's something, put it like that. You know, when you see the difficulties some of them go through, gosh, when you see the difficulties some of them go through, and for some of them it's even worse, then well, we should, if we are survivors, as we said, for whatever reason, that just for whatever, we never got into that relationship. Prabhupada once, there's a famous little discussion, brief, in a morning walk, where one ex-sannyasi, younger, less than 30, he was criticizing householders to Srila Prabhupada on a morning that, you know, they're attached, kind of materialistic, those types of ideas. And Prabhupada said, just because no woman would accept you, you took sannyas. Krishna. Anyway, you know, people, devotees, and people, in general too. Some of them get married, some don't. Great majority, but some don't. And some who get married are sort of happy enough or something, approximately. And some aren't. We know. And it's just, yeah. But it seems it's never easy. It seems it's never easy. So therefore, if we're in a situation we have not gone through that, then we should try and take it as Krishna's mercy, because it is. And when something is Krishna's mercy, we should definitely try and take it as Krishna's mercy. Capable of doing that, because we've all been through it in previous lifetimes. Don't worry. If someone is, oh, I didn't get married in this lifetime, gosh, I would have liked to. Don't worry. And it wasn't easy. You know, particularly if you marry the wrong person, and there are more of the wrong person than there are of the right person. Anyway, so let's just get into this here. People, as the verse says, Lord Kapila says, people whose lives were built upon indulgence in illicit sex life, they get put in tamasra, under tamasra and raurava. Yeah, under well, we would have to look, we could actually, but actually we should look at what the 5th canto says about the particular conditions in those hellish planets. Because each of the hellish planets has its sort of, you could say, specialties of specific particular types of sufferings. Let's just have a look here. The last chapter, verse 56, talking about the hellish planets. And let's see if we can just quickly find tamasra, under tamasra, and raurava. Let's have tamasra. A person who appropriates another's legitimate wife, children, or money, or husband, time of death by the fierce Yamadutas. We have met them. Yeah. Who bind him or her. This is just another use of the male gender, just as a formality. Don't worry, it applies to the ladies too. Bind him with the rope of time. Hellish planet known as Tamisra. On this very dark planet, the sinful man or woman, thank you, is chastised by the Yamadutas. He is starved and he's given no water to drink. The instance of Yamaraj cause him or her severe suffering. He faints from their chastisement. it's really extreme. The destination of a person who slides or another woman and enjoys her husband and children. So the destination of that person who slyly cheats, to break down the family unit and steal away, is the hell, the destination known as under tummy. There, his condition is exactly like that of a tree being chopped at its reaching under Tamisra, subjected to various extremes. These afflictions are so severe that he and sight. It is for this reason sages call this hell under Tamisra, because under means blind. Under means blind. Okay, so that's, and then there's Rolrava. Here it is. Accepts his body as his self, works very hard day and night for money to maintain his own body and the bodies of his wife and children. While working to maintain himself and his family, he may commit violence against other living entities. Such a person is forced to give up his death when he suffers the reaction for his envy of other creatures by being thrown into the hell called, let's just see. In this life, an envious person commits violent acts against. Therefore, after his death, when he's taken to hell by Yamaraj, those living entities who were hurt by him appear as animals called rurus to inflict very severe pain on him. Learned scholars call this hell. In this world, the ruru is more envious than a snake. This is really, really not nice. So therefore, in terms of association of males and females in Krishna consciousness, where there's an actual marriage relationship, it all has to be, carried out, you could say, very nicely. Marriage is, in Krishna consciousness, is a type of, Prabhupada would say, a license for some sense gratification, meaning sex life, as householders for producing Krishna conscious children. So there's a license for doing that, and when the children are born of, like, bona fide, sincere, Krishna conscious grihastas, then that's very good. We celebrate that. We celebrate that. And we're very happy and we congratulate. But the thing is, everything has to be done properly. Therefore, Prabhupada says, we read that in Vedic civilization, sex life is allowed only in a restricted way. It is for the married couple and only for begetting children. So it's not just for married couples. It's for married couples and only for begetting children. And, you know, there are restrictions like one time in the month when the wife is at her most fertile. And even actually Srila Prabhupada said the couple should chant 50 rounds first. Child. So it's not just, you know, that man and a woman have got together and it's been officialized by marriage, and therefore, you know, they can just do as they feel they want. If they do, then it becomes illicit. Even though it's a married couple, it becomes illicit sex life. And as Prabhupada says here, when sex life is indulged in for sense gratification, illegally and illicitly, both the man and the woman await severe punishment in this world or after death. And Prabhupada mentions some of these sexually, what they call them STDs, right? Sexually transmitted diseases, syphilis and gonorrhea. I'm sure that when Prabhupada wrote this, AIDS, HIV and AIDS was not, I don't know about existing, but was definitely not common. I think it was only in the 80s that it really became recognized as a specific. So, you know, and HIV and particularly AIDS, they are so much worse than these diseases mentioned here, syphilis and gonorrhea, sexually transmitted diseases. Prabhupada says virulent, very strong diseases. AIDS is so strong, we've all heard about that. And so they may go through some of these diseases in this life, in this world. Then after death, then, as we see in this verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, they're put into different kinds of hellish conditions to suffer in very extreme ways. The next verse that you'll be reading is the point. Well, I won't spoil the fun, but anyway, it makes the point that sometimes in some places on this planet, sometimes in some places, conditions which are like practically classic hellish planet conditions may exist. Yeah. For hellish punishments are sometimes visible on this planet also. Anyway, you can go into that tomorrow. Otherwise, generally here, this is a middle planet, and things are not so good, even at their best, and they're also not so bad, even at their worst, generally. But sometimes, then hellish, like real hellish conditions, not just bad conditions, but these extreme conditions of suffering are visible on this planet also. I read a little while ago, not long, just a matter of weeks ago, about some of the things that happened in the Nazi concentration camps. It was some anniversary of something to do with the Second World War or something, I forget. But there was some description people were put through, like special efforts made special to make people suffer. But special efforts to see what to tolerate before it just switches off. And, oh my Lord. And, you know, an interesting point is that, you know, of course, that was extreme, but inflicting of pain on people it goes on a lot, like serious pain. It really goes on a lot. Because on this planet, there are quite a lot of people who are just candidates for hell. They just have that sort of horrible, horrible, in the super extreme mentality, inflicting pain. Anyway, so they go to these hells, and gosh, as we read a few days ago, as they're bitten and their intestines are pulled out, but they don't die, and limbs are torn off, but they don't die. These types of things are inflicted upon them, then they remember, oh, this is because I did something. So anyway, obviously this verse and purport here is focusing on sex life, relationship between men and women. And we must remember in Krishna consciousness, of course, if there's a married couple, then the facility for sense gratification in this sense, a license. But just because you have a license for doing something doesn't mean you can just do it as you like. If you have a license to drive a motor car, it doesn't mean you can drive down West Street or Bhaktivedanta Swami Circle at 250 kilometers an hour. And when the police stop you, you pull out your license and say, hey, no problem, look, I got a license. Or if you've got a gun license, doesn't mean you can just shoot people and say, look, I've got my license, etc. So when a marriage license is there, so there's some facility for sense gratification, but one has to be careful, otherwise it will catch up. There are different ways it can catch up, but these are ways. So yes, as devotees, we really have to do our best, really do our best to maintain proper standards in relationships between the sexes. Sometimes, you know, we had an experience, I've mentioned it many times before in our Demons in Krishna's Vrindavan Leela seminar. When I was a new devotee, we had one of our together, new devotees, and one of our group, he liked preaching. So when visitors came to the temple, and we were right in the center of the city, and people would come every day, he would be there preaching. But only to the ladies. Hari Bol. And we took it up with him that, you know, better if the ladies preach to the visitor ladies, and you as a devotee man, you preach to the devotee men. And he got a bit, you know, offended and said, Prabhu, I am preaching Krishna consciousness. But it was obvious that he was, anyway, he was doing like that. So there are different situations. A married couple, that's one thing we already mentioned, but there are other situations, interactions between men and women who are devotees. I just read in Giriraj Maharaj's book, maybe 2 or 3 nights ago, Prabhupada and 2 Swami Narayan sannyasis. And when they walked, or when they were ushered into the room, Srila Prabhupada was preaching to one devotee. He passed away just very recently, Yasamati Nandan Prabhu from Gujarat. He was a very nice devotee. So he was there with his mother. And Prabhupada was preaching particularly to the mother, who was, an elderly woman, at least in her 60s. Prabhupada's preaching to her, and in come these Swami Narayan sannyasis, and they're ushered in, they walk in, and then they see Prabhupada and this lady, and Prabhupada's addressing her, and they just stopped. Anyway, you can read it. If you read the book, you should read the book. It's amazing. But it's very interesting. They stop like, wow, what is that? And then they say how they don't share the same space as women. If like when their programs, they put up, if we did it here, there would be a curtain through between the men and the ladies. That's how they do it, apparently. And so Prabhupada, I think at the end, or at some point, this point comes up about, these ways of dealing between men and women. And Prabhupada, I think it was at the end, tells the one person, or at some point, Prabhupada says, well, I suppose they think I'm fallen. Words to that effect, and I think he used the word fallen. Yes. So in Krishna consciousness, things between men married to each other, of course. But we have to do it nicely. We don't want to induce paranoia now. Sometimes after a class like this, paranoia becomes induced, and the devotees just don't know what to do when they're in the company of the opposite sex. So, we must deal and deal nicely, but we must be careful to deal nicely, and particularly not try to take advantage of situations like that young from our youth who just had to preach to ladies. We have to be really in any way, the different facilities we have and different situations we're put in. But in this regard specifically, one has to be very careful to, when they're dealings, to deal nicely in Krishna consciousness, respectfully, and not try to take advantage, because it happens sometimes. Devotees do that. They're in charge, of some members of the opposite sex, generally men, in charge of some members of the opposite sex, and they become bewildered and don't deal properly. So otherwise, if we keep chanting nicely, keep practicing nicely, and when devotional service with the opposite sex is there, which will more or less inevitably happen, at least from time to time, well, just do it nicely in Krishna consciousness. A man, a spirit soul devotee in a male body, is encouraged to see ladies and interact with them as he would with his mother. And the ladies are encouraged, it's not really discussed so much, but it is discussed a little, to associate with the men as if they're like their sons. And so it's they're very specific types of consciousness, which, if they're maintained nicely, create a nice atmosphere of service and appreciation for each other like that. And watch out, because as Srila Jiva Goswami told us in his purport, whatever pains are experienced are produced by association of man and woman. It's a deep thing, and it kind of infiltrates in different ways, different types of situations. Any comment or question? We don't get comments or questions after. Yes.
How to deal with it in ISKCON environment when being called, let's say, Mataji, is particularly distasteful for a person?
If it's particularly?
Distasteful.
They don't like being addressed like that.
Yeah.
Say is that, okay. How to deal with a situation for a lady if she's addressed as Mata or Mataji, but it's distasteful for her to be addressed like that. Well, just one point is that there is no need at all for the ladies to address each other as Mataji. I mean, just out of sort of habit or something. I know it's done. I've seen it. I couldn't say how many times, but and then it's just, there's no meaning in it. It's just a social convention only. But to the ladies, it's definitely encouraged. Definitely it's encouraged. I mean, it's not like it's on every page or so regularly, but it's definitely encouraged. So I would say probably take it as an opportunity from Krishna to learn some tolerance. Because I doubt, I mean, now when we're just a very small little community, we're just together just every day, the same people, you could tell the different people who are, a lady could tell those men who are addressing her as Mataji, which she doesn't like, could tell them, listen, do you mind not? And I don't know what the alternative, I guess, might be the name. When things are more sort of normal socially and there's lots of devotees around and it's, then I would say, and you can't just correct everyone, I would take it as an opportunity to learn some tolerance. Because tolerance is a real virtue, and if we can cultivate it, it'll help us a lot. Whereas intolerance is Maya, really. I mean, I know I haven't met, but I definitely heard of some cases in London. There was one lady, and some years ago, she got really upset and said, listen, I am not a mother, because she was not a mother, and she was sort of, affected by that. So don't call me mother. And it became a bit of not a scandal, but it definitely started making the rounds. It is acceptable. It's a little unusual grammatically, but to address women as Prabhu is actually possible, even though it's sort of like, it's the equivalent of, there's the slang, hey man. Yeah. So it's the equivalent of calling a woman a man. But, interesting, it was just pointed out to me, and a number of quotes were given, that Prabhupada on some occasions addressed female disciples as Prabhu on a number of occasions. And yeah. And then there are other ladies who said that, it's not recorded, but just in their interactions with Prabhupada, he addressed them as Prabhu. Feminine term is Prabhvi, but Prabhupada didn't use it, they say. He didn't use it. It's just an informal use of a Sanskrit term. Yeah. Is that okay?
Prabhu is sort of generic term meaning, is very specific meaning of mother.
Yes.
Here in Durban, in general, people seem to be thinking it's just some sort of title. I have heard plenty of congregation members introducing themselves as Mataji Bhaktin so-and-so, which is completely unnecessary. Or, older ladies referring to younger ones as Mataji, or husbands referring to their wives always as Mataji. It's very bizarre, and it has a strong sort of meaning. Mataji means mother, but
Yeah.
it's used a bit.
Yes, well, it's become a social convention. Like you may know that in Russia, it is not a social convention at all to ask people when you meet them, when you bump into them in the street or whatever, to ask, how are you? It's not done. They don't do it. Yeah, they don't ask how you are. And if you do, I was doing, going back many years, so you get some looks. Yeah. So, it's just a matter of one social convention, and it's not like Prabhupada. I've mentioned before, one time I think reporter, remember correctly, it was a reporter asked Prabhupada, how are you? And Srila Prabhupada said, what difference does it make to you how I am? Yeah, and there was a little exchange that, I could be dying, but you don't really care how I am. So it's it's become adopted as a social convention. Prabhu means master, so it is very specific actually. It's very specific. It's a statement, if it's done actually consciously, it's a statement of humility, which Mataji is also. because the mother is very important senior. Yeah. So, maybe it's something we should mention in classes and so on as time goes on, because it's definitely true for ladies, the man to be able to interact with a woman who is not his wife in a way free from any sort of sexual connotations whatsoever, and respectful. That's what it's meant to be. But yeah, I've seen it so much. The ladies calling each other Mataji. It's just a social convention. And, when I haven't seen it so much now, but when I first came to South Africa, it was really not for the Indian ladies, devotees who we would associate with, to call each other man. Yeah, it was not that unusual, and I noted it coming from, a sort of, you could say, a type of a hippie background where man is really common. It's just really common, like the use of the word cool. It's just really common in that sort of context. And I came here and I noticed calling each other man. That's funny, isn't it? I swear I noticed it. I noticed it. And, one time, Radhanath Mataji would remember, there was one couple from Merebank. I think Merebank, they've moved up. They're still around. I think they're in Unit 7 now. And they came with a bus on a Sunday, and a child drowned. Do you remember that? In the big sort of, we called it a dam, a brick enclosure full of water. The child drowned. And I remember so vividly, the mother, no, not the mother wasn't there, but one of the ladies, they're running around. They've realized the child's gone missing, but that no one to see, which eventually somebody did. And I remember so vividly this one lady running around, that child. And then we found the child dead. But these are social conventions. They're just arbitrary practices. Like, how are you? And the person does not ask you how you are, but you say, I'm fine, thanks. You get the idea? You're expecting its programmed response that I'm going to be asked how I am, so I answer, but you weren't asked how you were. Social convention. Anyway, if it applies to you, how would you prefer to be addressed? Okay. Hare Krishna. No, that's fine. That's fine. Okay. That's all. Oops.
Calling Mataji by name with absolutely no intent of, no bad intent. Is that okay?
You mean if she doesn't like it?
No, if she likes it. But you have no ill intention.
Of course, that's like this, addressing ladies as Prabhu, he did. But he never advocated doing that. that I'm aware of. I'm sure he didn't advocate from time to time that it's good to see a woman who's not your wife as a mother, as a mother. So in other words, it's normal. It's good. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
On that same thing, with that Mataji thing and all that. So sometimes I call them Mataji's Prabhus here, just to see what the feel. I get this really strange looks, as if
You call who?
the Matajis are like.
Oh, you did?
And she looked at me like, maybe I'm mixed up with what I'm seeing also. But Ruma, I just want to ask one. I'm not sure how to phrase the question. The reaction for sex life and taking license and whatever is this hellish planet. It's very severe.
Oh, yeah.
But now I'm just trying to understand what the sin is. Because like, if you commit an act of violence, let's say murder or stealing, we can understand that there's like violence committed to another living entity and bodily ache and everything. But I'm trying to understand what the sin is so much for it to warrant such a punishment.
Yeah, well, ultimately the sin is, in an ultimate sense, sort of the underlying, really powerful part, is that it's the greatest way to get distracted from Krishna.
Okay.
Yeah, because now you've got this other person who is taking the place of Krishna, the focus of your life and all that sort of thing, where Krishna should be. But otherwise, it's an abusive use of the material body and abusively using someone else's material body for sense gratification. When we just do something just for our own sensual pleasure, that is wrong. And you get reaction for that. That like in a husband and wife devotee relationship, the license is there, but if they sort of get carried away, then it's an abuse of the license. Yeah, it's an abuse, and using their partner, or maybe just abusing each other, mutual abuse. For something which these things are not intended for, they're not designed for, not meant for. So, yeah, and therefore, people who are really, really into these things, as Prabhupada was saying, they get these diseases in this lifetime. Yeah. Plus, then they go to hell. Like intoxication.
Yeah.
You're just abusing your physical or psychological system for some enjoyment. So that you get karmic reaction for that.
Oh, sorry, come here.
Shreya Gurudev, I just wanted to know if I could have 10 minutes of your time, if you do have
10 minutes.
or less than.
Right now?
Or any time.
Well, it could be. What is this? 10 minutes. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so first thing which I wanted is your autograph. So normally I do come to you every year, but because of last year, so there are 2 books. These are just notebooks which I have of as I read Srimad Bhagavatam, and I take down points as it is
Uh-huh.
without making my own. So, just if you could write anything about